It's a coin double feature. This is a really good month for GMT games. Got these two in the mail. Both, I would say, coin games, despite this being labeled as a irregular conflict series. I think that's probably more true of this game than other games in the irregular conflict series, but as we all know, the coin genealogy is strong across both of these. This is Coin Volume 13. Can't believe we're up to 13. So Andean Abyss, I think, came out in the year 2011 or 2012. So that's 13 or 14 years, and we're up to Coin Volume 13. And if you don't count the ICS games, that's on average one coin game a year, which is, I would say, by any metric, in historical tabletop wargaming, a very successful run. So we've got a new coin game in the main series. We've got an ICS coin game here that is tackling a very interesting, unique subject matter, and I thought I would do just a quick unboxing. I think these two games are actually really good to kind of do together because China's War, 1937 to 1941, which is an interesting topic on its own, is a pretty straightforward coin game from designer Brian Train. I'm very excited about this game because Brian Train has also had his hand in the design of my favorite coin game, which is A Distant Plain, Afghanistan. And so I am curious to see what he's bringing to the table in this one. I've looked through the rules. I'm going to be playing this very, very shortly. It appears to be a pretty standard coin experience for players, with some tweaks here and there that kind of reflect the historical realities of China before and during World War II. And then Bronx Expressway is designed by Non-Breaking Space, who is, at least for GMT, a first-time designer, and is tackling a topic that is completely different than the kinetic warfare in China. It's about the urban planning of the Bronx neighborhood from 1940 to 2000, which is kind of a heady subject, and is a three-player game, and we'll get into that in a moment. But first I want to unbox China's War, because I think this is probably going to be easier to talk about. So we've got the rules booklet, comes in at really only about 15 pages, coined by this point, a very well-known quantity. We have got a rules and reference booklet for the non-player bot, which is card-based, the Sun Wukong card-based non-player. So this is if you're going to want to have one of the factions be taken over by this bot, and there's an example of play in there. I really like this illustration on the front. It must be something historical from this time period. We've got the playbook. This is going to have a tutorial, how the factions interlock together. This is a really nice addition for players who have not played coin before, and to kind of see how the gears turn with the system. Pronunciation guide, important since we're talking about East Asia. Here is a Western audience. Some backgrounds and tips for the event cards. And then some history, designer's notes, and a bibliography. I just want to look real quick at page 10 because it will show you a visual representation of how the different factions, of which there are 4 in this game. We've got the Japanese, the Chinese nationalist government, the warlords, who are like independent powers, and we've got the Chinese communists. And it sort of shows how these interact with the other factions, which is kind of interesting. So this is quite a cool visual reference to show that which capabilities, because in this game, certain factions' abilities can only target certain other factions. So you get a little grid for that right there. And there is a pronunciation guide, which is nice. Then we are going to have 4 of the identical player aids. These are in typical coin style. You've got your operations here, your special activities here, reminder of the victory conditions. This is for the nationalists. We flip it open. We've got the warlords, we've got the communists, and then we've got Japan, and there'll be 4 of those. This tells you how to play the game. Once you know the rules, you can basically play the game off of here. Primarily, you're going to want to use this not only to know what your own faction can do, such as the Japanese can do an anti-bandit action that's unique to them, their special activities. But you also want to be able to know what the opponents can do. So much of coin is knowing what your own capabilities are, but also knowing what your opponent's capabilities are. And as you play coin more and more, you start to realize that the game is trying to get all 4 factions in your head at the same time to make strategic decisions. Here is the non-player bot worksheet, non-player bot player aid for and rules reminders. For playing if you decide to go that route. Here we have a sheet of event instructions, which I am curious if this is for the non-player or if it's for the 4-player game. I'd have to check on that. Here is the, looks like the non-player propaganda round. So this must be a player aid for what the bot will do for different events, perhaps. I'll have to look more into that. Here we have a summary sheet of the propaganda round. I think there's 2 of these. That's kind of nice. And then also the battle procedure, which is called Assault in this game. It actually uses dice. So some coin games are deterministic in terms of attacking. This one, you're going to roll dice and try and roll equal to or less than the number of troops that you have in the assault. And also each nationality's troops are worth kind of a different number of hits and a different number of attacking points. So it's kind of an interesting model for the combat system. I think one of the things that probably sets this game apart from other coin games. Propaganda round, what you do, how you do all that stuff. There are 2 of those, which is nice. You can have one on each end of the table. That's quite nice. And we've got the counters, and there's 1 counter sheet. So we've got nationalist control on one side, and we've got warlords control on the other. So a little bit of an inversion from a distant plane. We've got some event reminder markers, capability reminder markers, the various game track markers for victory conditions and other things that are faction specific, terror markers, and on the back of terror we've got sabotage. You're going to use those on lines of communication. This is the first coin game in a while that I can remember seeing lines of communication on, which is a big part of the Japanese strategy in this game. And we've got support or opposition and support markers to show which spaces on the map are going to be in opposition or support, because 2 of the factions are going to care about that. We will take a look at the map in a moment. We've got a bag of baggies, which is how I usually store my coin games. 4 small D6s, 1 for each faction. So I think the first time I've seen this tiny dice in a coin game, but those will fit in the bags nicely. Got 2 things of wooden pieces. This looks like the guerrillas, the faction initiative markers, the pawns for special activities and commands, and money. And here we have got the troops and the bases. So we've got cubes for regular soldiers, and then in this bag, obviously, the hexes are going to be your guerrillas and irregulars. We have got 2 decks of cards. We have got the deck of China's War event cards. The whole game is going to be driven by these events. Typically, the event is going to have 2 choices and is going to determine the turn order. And then here looks like the non-player. These are tarot-sized. These are going to be the non-player cards that drive their actions, which is a really nice way to do this. Old coin games used to have to look on a flowchart on like a sheet. It was kind of confusing. This simplifies it quite nicely. So that is what you get in China's War. I'll show you the map. So here we have the map of China's War. And this direction looks like it's east. So if we were to come around here, you would recognize the coastline of China. Here we would have French Indochina, which would be Vietnam. And then coming up this way, here's Manchukuo. In the game, the Japanese are the only ones allowed to use Manchukuo to have units in it. And then you can see the provinces with the different terrain. So we've got mountainous terrain. We've got these green colors, which is, let's see, it's rough terrain is brown. We've got plains terrain in green. And so those are the 2 types of terrain, it looks like. And then we've got coastal provinces, which are going to be touched to the ocean. We've also got these lines of communication. So we've got major rivers, which is kind of a first for the coin series. These have an economic value on them, and same for the railroads. And the Japanese are really invested in sort of exploiting the commerce and wealth of China by invading and kind of dominating these lines of communication. The other factions are obviously trying for different political-oriented victory, such as control of regions or population in support or opposition. Patronage is another one. I think patronage is for the Chinese nationalist player. So this looks very classically coin, even down to the art style. I really like it. I think this is Matthew Wallhead doing the art on this. Here's the eligible factions display. And you can see the available forces. I really like the artwork so far that I've seen on this. I think it's great. Incidentally, Matthew Wallhead is the artist for a bunch of the stuff in my game, Seljuk Byzantium Besiege. They keep him very busy over there, and he's very talented. So yeah, I can't wait to play this. This is China's War by Brian Train. He is my favorite by far coin designer. And I've been eagerly looking forward to this one for quite a long time. I'm curious to see how the counterinsurgency elements of coin reflect sort of the realities of what essentially was a civil war and an invasion all at the same time during the early phases of World War II. That being said, we are going to now shift to, ironically, the same time period. So this game covers up until 1941. We're going to go backwards just a bit to 1940 and look at Cross Bronx Expressway. All right, so here's Cross Bronx Expressway. That's the first time I've seen a GMT game with a landscape cover, which I have to admit I really, really like. I think that's awesome, and I think the art used here It's quite cool. There's a whole blog post by Non-Breaking Space on Board Game Geek about the cover and why he decided to use this sort of graffiti art style, why it's important to the Bronx and the culture of the Bronx. I know some people have said the readability is not possible, but that's the purpose of the art. The art in this sort of wild style, like graffiti art, is meant to be so over-exaggerated that it is not supposed to be text necessarily. It's supposed to be a visual iconography in some senses. So, but Cross Bronx Expressway, let's get it open. So, we have got a small booklet. This is the first time I've ever seen this from GMT. Private Orientation Guide. So this looks like an introduction and getting started booklet. I really like the way this is laid out. This is very different from the normal GMT rules format. Talking about the setup, the map, how you talk about infrastructure and population. I suspect, and I really like the use of color and margins here, talking about the different actions and what they do, actions and around. So if you haven't played Coin before, this is going to be probably the place to start. If this is kind of your first Coin system game, you're probably going to want to look at this. This might also be a really good way to have a teaching script. So if you're trying to teach people how to play this, this might be the booklet where you start. Talks about all the different phases. I'm very curious to see how learning the game goes with something like this. So this is, it looks like there's one of these for each of the three factions. Yeah, so look, there's a separate book for each of the three factions. You've got the private sector, essentially, of the Bronx. You've got the community. This is going to orient you towards the community's strategies and what they do. This is quite an interesting presentation. Then you've got the public, and so this is the third faction in the game. And these three factions are going to be kind of interacting with each other and to kind of come up with a development plan for the Bronx in New York for across 6 decades. So here is the rules and regulations booklet. This much more kind of in line with GMT case style format, although they are using a margin format here, which is nice. Last time I saw this from a GMT game was Triumph and Tragedy and Conquest and Consequence, where there was like a margin heavy manual. So it's single column here with a margin. This is going to be, I don't know where I'm going to start. I'm probably going to start with the rules when I play this, just to get a sense of how to play, and then I may look through these to see if there's a way to teach the factions for new players. Here is a historical record. Now, this is the meatiest book, I think, in the whole box. And this is, I think, maybe one of the most interesting pieces of documentation in here. This is the designer talking about what it was like to design this game, why he chose this topic. There's some historical quotes in here from the period. This is going to be really interesting. This is a topic that you're not going to see a lot of like commercial hobby games on, and the fact that GMT is publishing this is quite interesting. The fact that we have a game about kind of urban development and the contentiousness between different interest stakeholders is I think kind of a milestone in terms of like how we can use the wargaming hobby to grow the understanding of conflict. So I'm very keen to play this, and I think this history book is going to be quite elucidating once I've played the game, because I know none of this history. Once I play the game, I'm definitely probably going to want to take a look through here and just see how the history is expressed, because it is, I mean, it's a major American city, or part of it anyway, and there's a lot that happens, and this is, you can see some of the events talking about what happens. I really like the way this is laid out. This is awesome. All of the images from the event card, what year they happen, kind of the iconography of their effects, but also the history of that event, and then the scenario setups. Done as sort of like a census kind of style, like a population demographics chart, which I think is kind of interesting. Just a lot of thought went into the graphic design and presentation here. I'm very impressed with that. So there looks like there's a scenario set up for each of the decades. So it looks like maybe 6 scenarios. Let's see, we'll keep going. Here's the 1980 setup. The game actually goes all the way through to 2000. And I do find it interesting that the images retain their black and white style throughout, even though we've got some, obviously the era of color photography here. Yeah, this is really, really fascinating presentation. I think this is in the same way that I think Atlantic Chase kind of redefined the way that historical strategy games can be taught and presented. This game, I think, is doing a really interesting, taking a really interesting approach to doing that. And then some acknowledgments and the selected bibliography and filmography if you want some additional reading on the topic. So quite interesting. So here we have the player aids. Now, as we saw, these are a tri-fold half sheet, which is interesting. So they're not the 8.5 by 11 fold out we saw in China's War. Sort of a 3-column fold out here. So here are all of the actions that the factions can take, plus a little summary of the census phase. And then on this side, we've got community, the reset phase, what the little icons mean. This game is much more iconography driven than other coin games, which is cool. So this is the one for community. This is the one for private, what every urban investor should know. Obviously, community, what every Bronx resident should know. And here, what every public servant should know, the public. So these are organized so that the front panel corresponds to the faction you're playing, and then when you open them, you can see the other faction's abilities on the inside. That's a cool way to present that. Here's the non-player aid. So again, if you're playing with a non-player, how you make them behave and so forth. So here we have a counter sheet, and I think this might be the only counter sheet in the game. So we've got these double-sided tokens. Looks like economy and social. So you're going to be trying to develop locations. We've got these large tiles here, and these are going to go in the city of the Bronx, and they're going to represent spaces for the different pieces to go, and for potentially maybe some of these markers. Here's a census. Here's a petition. Bonds. On the back of the petition is blight. And then we've got some faction-specific markers here. I'm very keen to see how this plays out on the table. We've got another sheet of tiles and another sheet of tiles. So it looks like each of these correspond to one of the factions in the game. And so potentially your tile might have an impact on what pieces go there, or potentially how that space functions. I play tested this game at a convention, at a GMT warehouse weekend, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't remember everything about my experience, but I do remember some of it vaguely. Here's the map. We'll get to that. And here is, again, more wood. So we've got all of these cubes, including these big chunky square cubes here, which is interesting. I'm not sure what those represent. We've got some smaller cubes, and of course the coin standard pawns. We've got the faction-specific markers. Now, normally in other coin games, these are going to be guerrillas or soldiers. That in this game, that is not what they are. There's not actually any, I don't think actually any like kinetic violence covered in this game, although I could be wrong about that. Here's a custom die. Looks like it has money and cube results on it, and S numbers. Not sure what those are for. Again, bag of bags, probably the best way to store this. And then we have got the event decks. So like any coin game, you're going to have an event deck that drives the play. You've got the initiative turn order here, and then the effects of these cards. Now, what's interesting here is that I don't necessarily know if this event is 3 choices, or when you select the event here, you do all of these, and that's going to be something I have to figure out. But I do like the graphic design here. So we've got 2 packs of cards, and it looks like the cards, so there's some little reference cards in here too, it looks like, for each of the factions. But it does look like the cards based on the back here are specific to certain decade scenarios. And I know that you can link the decades. I know, and Non-Breaking Space has said that you can play the game from 1940 all the way through 2000, but that's a really big, long undertaking. But it is something that I would like to do at some point. But you can also just play a single decade, and that's like a one-sitting game. I really appreciate that variety in scenarios. I tried to do that with my own game. You know, you want something that's like a short one-session sit-down. You have that, but then if you want to play like an epic long thing, then you've got that as well. So let's spread out the map of the Bronx. So here is the map for the game of the Bronx. We have got the community faction holding box for their pieces here. They've got activists. We've got the private sector. They've got employees, and we've got the public, and we've got cases. We've also got vulnerabilities and population boxes. Not sure what those really do. Here we have a little display for infrastructure, organization, society, economics, and other things. And then we've got what decade we're playing. This must be like some sort of turn track, perhaps. The event cards go here, and here is the sequence of play, which is much different than you'll see in other coin games. I can't remember exactly. I remember this is like super different, where if you pick something and you have to go below it, or you have to go to the right of it, or someone puts something here and you can only, or here and you can only choose to the right of it. It's something like that. I apologize if I don't have it correctly, but I remember the action matrix in this game is quite different from other coin games. And yeah, the map looks really good. I mean, it looks like an urban planning map, which you would expect thematically for this kind of game. Interestingly, looks like the money or victory track goes into the negatives, which would make sense because I think there's loans in this game. And yeah, and oddly, you start at 0 on 2 sides, which is kind of interesting. This track goes up to 34 here, and this one goes up to 15, so there must be 2 different purposes. Yeah, so the art here, again, by Matthew Wallhead, same as China's War. It looks like his style. I really like the color palette. The tiles, you can see, will go into these different districts. That will determine what kind of pieces can be placed there. You can also see these highways. So here's the titular Cross Bronx Expressway that was built in 1961. And I assume that this has an impact on what scenario you're playing. Like, I assume if you're playing a scenario in the 40s, this does not exist, perhaps. Who knows? Here's the Bronx River Parkway, built in 1951. And essentially the game is trying to show you how these different stakeholders of the city planning and the city felt about a bunch of stuff, a bunch of people being forced out of their homes to build these expressways for commuters and whatnot. Super fascinating topic. I am really, really excited to play this. It's a 3-player game. We don't have a lot of those. It's on a really, something that I never would have been exposed to without being in wargaming. And I'm really, really happy this got published. Very excited to see what kind of impact this game has. I know it's been in the works for a long, long time, and it looks very beautiful. So congratulations to Non-Breaking Space and GMT Games for this finally releasing. It's, I think, a very, I don't want to say risky, it's an ambitious title, and the fact that it's finally published is awesome. So a lot of good coin stuff out right now. If you like the series, definitely check one of these out. I will be playing both in very short order, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.